If your ex moved on fast, you're not crazy. You just didn't realize they already left before the breakup even happened. Newsflash, they didn't just move on quickly like it looks from the outside. And I know that's the version that hurts a little less to believe. But the reality is usually way more uncomfortable than that. Because when someone seems to replace you that fast, it's rarely something that started after the breakup. It's something that had already been building, quietly in the background while you were still fully present in the relationship. Still believing everything was real. Still showing up with the same energy, the same effort, the same love. And I'm saying this because I wish someone had said it to me earlier instead of letting me sit there overthinking every little detail, trying to make sense of something that already had an answer I just didn't want to accept yet. If your ex moved on within weeks, or even days, to the point where it made you question whether the relationship meant anything at all, you have to understand that emotional connections don't form that fast out of nowhere. People don't just wake up one day, completely detached from you and suddenly deeply connected to someone else. That kind of shift doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. It takes emotional availability. It takes attention. And that means while you were still in the relationship thinking everything was normal or fixable, they had already started redirecting their energy somewhere else, even if it wasn't obvious, even if it wasn't official, even if you didn't catch it in the moment. And I get it, because your mind will immediately try to protect you from that reality by creating softer explanations that are easier to live with, like telling yourself it's just a rebound, or that they're just trying to distract themselves from the pain, or that it's not serious and won't last. Because believing those things gives you a sense of control. It makes it feel temporary instead of real. But deep down, there's always that quiet discomfort that doesn't go away. That feeling that something about this situation doesn't fully add up. Because no matter how much you try to rationalize it, emotionally, it just doesn't make sense for someone to switch that fast unless something had already shifted before everything officially ended. That emotional shift you're confused about didn't begin when the breakup happened. It began long before that final conversation ever took place. And the hardest part about realizing this is that when you look back, without trying to protect them or rewrite the story in your head, you can actually see the signs that were there the whole time. The subtle distance that slowly grew, the way their energy changed in small ways that you couldn't fully explain, the moments where something felt off but you pushed it aside because you didn't want to believe it. Because believing it would have meant accepting that things weren't as solid as you thought they were. They didn't just wake up one day and replace you like flipping a switch. They were already slowly detaching from you over time, little by little, in ways that are easy to miss when you're emotionally invested. While you were still showing up fully, still trying to communicate, still putting effort into making things work, still loving them the same way you always did. And that's what makes this realization hit so much harder, because it means you weren't even on the same timeline. You were still in it, still believing in it, while they had already started stepping away emotionally without fully telling you. This kind of pain hits differently because it's not just about losing someone you cared about. It's about realizing that while you were investing in something you thought was still alive, they were already in the process of letting it go. And that creates a very specific kind of confusion that turns into overthinking. Because now you're not just dealing with the loss. You're trying to understand how something that felt real to you could have been fading on their side without you fully seeing it. And this is the part your mind keeps fighting, because it wants to compare, it wants to understand, it wants to believe that maybe the new person has something you didn't. But the truth is, this situation is not about them being better than you. It's about your ex being the kind of person who avoids honesty, who doesn't communicate properly when their feelings change, who chooses the easier path of detaching, quietly instead of having the difficult conversation. And that says everything about their character and nothing about your worth. It might look like they've moved on and everything is perfect from the outside, especially if you're seeing curated moments on social media or hearing things from other people. But relationships that start with that kind of overlap rarely come from a stable or healthy place, because they're usually built on avoidance, on unresolved emotions, on the need to fill a gap instead of actually processing what happened. And that's not something to be jealous of, even if your mind tries to convince you otherwise. What really keeps you stuck isn't even them anymore after a certain point. It's the mental loop you get trapped in, where your brain keeps trying to solve something that doesn't have a satisfying answer, replaying conversations, analyzing small details, wondering when exactly things started changing. comparing yourself to the new person in ways that slowly drain your self-worth. And that's where rejection stops being just pain and starts turning into obsession, because your mind is trying to regain control over something that already ended. And the reason this feels so intense is because rejection doesn't just affect your emotions. It hits your identity. It makes you question your value, your attractiveness, your importance in someone's life. And suddenly it's not just about missing them anymore. It becomes about trying to understand why you weren't chosen, why you were replaced, why it felt so easy for them to move on when for you it still feels heavy. And that's what makes it so hard to let go, because it feels personal on a level that goes deeper than just heartbreak. At some point you find yourself going back through everything, almost like you're replaying a movie, in your head frame by frame trying to catch the exact second where things started to fall apart. Like maybe if you can just identify that one moment where their tone shifted or their energy felt different, or their attention wasn't fully there anymore, then somehow it will all make sense and feel easier to accept. But the truth is, it rarely works like that, because what you're looking for isn't one clear turning point. It's actually a slow, emotional shift that happened over time in ways that were too subtle to fully recognize while you were still inside the relationship. Which is why now you feel stuck trying to solve something that was never meant to have a clean, satisfying answer. And if you're really honest with yourself, there's a part of you that already felt something was off, long before anything was said out loud. Not in a logical or obvious way, but in that quiet emotional sense that something just didn't feel the same anymore, like the warmth was slightly different, or the effort felt inconsistent, or their presence didn't feel as genuine as it used to. But instead of trusting that feeling, you probably explained it away, telling yourself they were just stressed or tired or going through something. Because accepting what your intuition was picking up on would have meant facing a reality you weren't ready for yet. And sometimes your mind chooses comfort over truth even when your body already knows what's happening. When you start to feel someone pulling away from you, your first instinct is almost always to close that gap by giving more of yourself. Like you become more patient, more understanding, more available. You try to fix things before they're even fully broken, because somewhere inside you believe that if you just love them a little better or show up a little stronger, then maybe they'll come back to you emotionally. But the hard truth is that you cannot love someone into staying when they've already started detaching. And no amount of extra effort from your side can compensate for the absence of effort from theirs, because relationships don't work on one person trying harder while the other is quietly checking out. For you, the breakup probably felt sudden, like everything collapsed in one conversation that you didn't fully see coming. But for them, it was often just the moment they finally set out, allowed what they had already been processing internally for a while, which is why they can seem calm or certain or even emotionally distant when it happens. Because while you're just beginning to feel the full weight of the loss, they may have already gone through a large part of that emotional process on their own, without including you in it. And that imbalance is what makes it feel so unfair. One of the most confusing parts is seeing them look okay, or even happy, not long after everything ended, because it makes you question whether any of it actually meant something to them. But what you're seeing on the surface doesn't always reflect what's going on underneath, since a lot of people cope by distracting themselves instead of processing their emotions, throwing themselves into new connections, new routines, or new attention, so they don't have to sit with the discomfort of what they did or what they lost. And just because someone looks fine doesn't mean they've actually dealt with anything in a healthy way. After the breakup, your mind has a way of filtering your memories so that the good moments become louder, and the difficult ones fade into the background, which makes the relationship feel more perfect than it actually was. Because now that it's gone, your brain focuses on what you miss instead of what you struggled with, replaying the connection, the comfort, the small moments that made you feel close, while quietly ignoring the confusion, the imbalance, and the emotional distance that was already there. And that selective memory makes it even harder to let go, because it feels like you lost something flawless when in reality it was already falling apart. Part of what makes this so painful isn't just the emotional attachment. It's the way rejection hits your sense of identity, because being replaced or feeling like you were easily moved on from creates this deep internal reaction where you start questioning your value, your attractiveness, and what you lacked compared to someone else. Even if logically, relationships are more complex than that. And this is where the pain becomes more than just missing them. It turns into a struggle with your own self-worth, which is why it feels so intense and personal. Once that mindset starts, it's very easy to fall into constant comparison, where you look at the new person and analyze everything about them, from how they look to how they act to what they post, trying to find some kind of answer that explains why them and not you. But the truth is, you're trying to solve an emotional situation using surface-level information, and that will never give you clarity. It will only make you feel worse, because you don't actually know their relationship. You only see fragments of it while your mind fills in the gaps with assumptions that are usually far harsher than reality. At some point in all of this, you're going to sit there and genuinely question yourself, wondering why you're still thinking about them this much, why it still hurts when technically it's already over, why it feels like you're the only one stuck in this while they seem to be moving forward so easily, and it can start to feel frustrating, even embarrassing, like you should be further along by now. But the truth is, you're not crazy for feeling this way, because what you're dealing with isn't just a breakup. It's confusion, it's emotional inconsistency, it's unanswered questions. And when something ends without clarity, your mind doesn't just let it go. It keeps looping, trying to make sense of something that never gave you a clean ending. The process of moving on from something like this doesn't happen in a straight line where every day gets a little better. Instead, it's messy and unpredictable, where one day you feel okay and you think you're finally over it. And then the next day, something small like a memory or a random thought pulls you right back into it. And that doesn't mean you're going backwards. It just means you're processing something that actually mattered to you. And healing from emotional confusion takes time, because you're not just letting go of a person. You're letting go of the version of reality you believed in. What you're feeling isn't only about the person themselves. It's also about everything they represented in your life. The routine you built around them. The comfort of having someone to talk to every day. The sense of familiarity and connection that became part of your normal. And when that suddenly disappears, it leaves a gap that feels bigger than just the loss of one person. Which is why it can feel so hard to separate your emotions from the situation, because you're not just grieving them. You're grieving the space they occupied in your life. Eventually, whether slowly or all at once, something begins to change inside you. Not because the pain completely disappears, but because you start getting tired of carrying it in the same way, tired of replaying the same thoughts, tired of checking for updates that don't actually help you, tired of giving your energy to something that no longer gives anything back. And that exhaustion becomes a turning point, because instead of asking why it happened or what you could have done differently, you begin to focus on what you need now to feel okay again. And that's where your control starts to come back. And this is the part that changes everything if you really let it sink in. You didn't lose someone who was fully there for you. You didn't lose someone who was choosing you in the same way you were choosing them. You lost someone who had already started stepping away. Someone who was capable of emotionally detaching without being honest about it. Someone who chose the easier path instead of the right one. And once you see that clearly, it stops feeling like something you need to chase or fix or understand. Because you realize it's not a loss of something solid. It's the realization of something that was never as stable as you believed. And that clarity, even though it hurts at first, is exactly what sets you free.